I'm John Dow, the conversation coach. Usually I help others with their speaking, interviews, English, what have you, dating. But I got a comment from an old video that I did. Basically, I just had an honest talk on how difficult it was coming back from the JET program. A lot of people come back from Asia in general, teaching English over in Asia. You know, they have a good time overseas and they have a lot of good memories and growth from that. But the freaking job market, it's not always easy to tap back into. And for everybody who manages to get like a full-time job, that's awesome. But there's so many people who struggle and it's almost like a burden of shame. And I feel like not enough people talk about that. So it can kind of skew perspective. Just a quick take, Michelle, how was it for you?
The reason why I left Korea was I thought, like, I'm American. I need to go back to America and actually start to find a career.
Hmm.
And in my head, I was just like, oh, yeah, I work hard. I'm going to find a job. I had that mindset. But then once I started looking for a job, I didn't realize how many things actually weigh against you. Like for me personally, having a foreign name in Arkansas does weigh against me. And living in a place like Arkansas, they don't give a shit about international experience.
Well, see, that's the thing. I had that trouble in Arkansas because I stayed in Arkansas 1 year after coming back and moving out to a bigger city in Boston. I did have more opportunity, but it wasn't quite that automatic switch like I thought it would be because
Yeah.
there's plenty of places in a big city that don't give a shit about international experience either. It's one extreme or the other, right? It's like, okay, we don't really care, or you get typecast as a teacher where to this day it pisses me off that a lot of companies don't see the crossover skills. But then uh, I appreciate this hiring manager who just gave me the straight up honest talk. She was like, listen, John, you think that this JET program experience makes you unique, but it doesn't, because it's basically like everything that you're shooting for, like million or let me walk that back, hundreds of other jets are applying for the same thing. So like that thing that I thought made me stand out a little bit is just a dime a dozen.
What were you applying for that other jet people were applying to?
This is for Japanese university.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because for me, like I didn't apply for anything like international related. I just applied for anything. Like I obviously applied for media stuff because that was what my major was in.
Hmm.
But like, I wasn't super picky. Like still applied for like state jobs, which I've been with my state job for the past 5 years. Um, but like the thing is, it's just like I applied for whatever. And it was even a part-time job as like a cashier in like some chain store, I could even get.
No, I remember me trying to shoot for retail and yeah, getting turned away for that.
When you show them, it's like, oh, hey, look, I graduated. I had overseas experience. In a way, if you apply to those like big chain places just to do retail, be a cashier of stock or whatever, sometimes they don't even consider you. They're like, oh, you're too good for this. You're just gonna leave.
Yep.
We're kind of in like this like gray zone where it's just kind of like we're not qualified enough for certain things, but then we may be overqualified for like just menial jobs.
Hmm. And it sucks because, if you want to try to empathize with like the company, it's like, okay, yeah, it sucks to have someone bail ship. But then it's like, how can we even prove or say that we're not going to be those type of people, like when you're trying to get to work? But it's a losing battle on that conversation. I had this comment fairly recently. I think it popped up on Friday. The username is Joe K, but who knows these days if that's a guy or girl. But in sum, the comment was, thank you for making this video. This person was a former jet. They also had a hard time finding employment afterwards. But now he or she is in their first permanent job for a year. And they don't know if leaving this job for Jet again is a good or bad thing. They want to work as a teacher in Japan again, but they don't really know what it's going to be like over there. And then if they come home again, they're going to run into the same problem probably. Some extra context is their current job isn't bad, but they're only in it for the money because it pays well and it doesn't really spark joy, as was her name, Marie Kondo says. So the question is it worth rejoining Jet, or should they just stay in their home country and rebuild their life using the money that they have?
So the thing I'm really confused about is she wants, or I don't know, I feel like this is a she, so I'm just gonna say she, could be a he
Sure.
maybe. She wants to go back to Japan to teach English, but her only hesitation is like she doesn't know what's gonna be like. Like to me, it's just kind of like you want to go back to Japan. You just, if that's what you really want, you have to take that risk. Like in the end, like I think like security is more important, but then there are people who have privilege to pursue happiness. That sounds terrible, but like, there's things like for me, like I have student loans. Fuck happiness. I have these priorities to take care of, and I'm doing fine. Like I'm not like unhappy, but it's just kind of like, you know, like, and plus her job here pays well. Like, how much worse is her pay going to be while she's in Japan? Because, she's given a stipend to pay for her housing. Like, how much less is it? And, like if she stays in America, she's like trying to rebuild her life. But like, what kind of life does she want that she needs all this money?
Yeah, these are great considerations, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to record a video to talk it out because there isn't any real easy yes or no. Well, I mean, if we want to take it for like the simple fact when you know how some people are like, hey, can I ask you for some advice? But basically they just want you to tell them how right they are. Yeah, we can do that. Oh man, that's awesome. Good job. Congratulations. You already got back into Jet. You're gonna have a really good time. I mean, that is a possibility. Just we don't know the dearth of like their life's living. On one hand, fuck happiness, like you got bills to pay, or can you manage, or is that current job that you had, even if it wasn't like your true passion, did it give you enough money and time and space so you could pursue your real passions? Or, I can also empathize. I got out of a bad corporate job fairly recently and I made an awesome diss track on it that you guys should go check out. But if it's something that's affecting your mental health, then yeah, maybe you need to get out of that escape. Uh, Maybe you need to get out and have that escape and then pursue something that's more to your passion. But I would just really, hone in and talk in, like you said, about teaching in Japan, because for you were talking from the angle of, hey, you're gonna have to take that risk. On the other hand, I mean, shit, it's like almost 10 years since like I started on it. But Japan doesn't always change that much. And like the
Mm.
JET program, especially, like you might have a different climate if you were a senior high school ALT and you're switching over to junior high and elementary school. That would give you a little bit of difference.
Do they have control over that?
When you initially apply, like you get to make a request, or in like your
Okay.
statement of purpose, they kind of situate like, for example, one of my friends, Canada Chris, he's a tall white guy. They put him in like a rowdy senior high school because it's like you can handle that. They wouldn't
Right.
put like they probably wouldn't put you in like the roughest all boys school in the state.
Mhm.
um, for me, one of the things that I weighed on my mind is, if I ever had the money to just go back to Japan on vacation, maybe that would burst a bubble too. Because I can empathize with like having the thought, oh, what would it be like? But to go through the whole ordeal and process, I'm kind of curious what this person said during the JET interview again, because the JET program would want to know, it's like, hey, why you want to do this again, or what's your future plan? And obviously, an interview is just an interview, but they had to have some sort of rhyme or reason in their head to speak at that time, right?
Were you part of the recruiting team or training team? I know you had like a top position on Jet.
In my third year, I was prefectural advisor, so it's like
Does that affect like choosing people that come?
actually picking now.
Oh, okay, because I was about to ask you, like, someone reapplying, does that hurt their chances or like help them?
From my intel, I don't think it does. You
You
know,
don't think
like
it helps them?
I don't think it helps or hurt them. It's just
Oh, okay.
whatever.
I don't know if it's just like the way you read it or if like that's how she meant it. She's been in her current job for a year. And she says she's fine, it's not bad. But like I don't know if it's just the way that you read it, but why is there this urgency to leave also?
Hmm.
Like again, there's like so many questions that I have for this person.
Yeah, and that's a valid question too. Like, is it short-term suck, or again, is it something that's like mentally taxing, like
Yeah.
horrible coworkers or bosses? I'm not going to tell anybody to suck it up and stick with it. Like, but it is a consideration to take, just as equally valid as, when you're on the JET program and you contract year to year, they always make it like a tough position when you're supposed to decide. You're supposed to decide like in the middle of winter, and winter, especially in Toyama, could suck. And so some people are like, "Oh man, I want to get out here as quickly as possible."
Mhm.
And then by the time spring rolls around and spring and summer are awesome, they're like, "Oh, damn it! Like, why did I say I only wanted to stay here a year?" Something else that I really think is worth considering is, what exactly is it about teaching in Japan that's so great? And I'm not saying it's not, but like this person needs to really evaluate that, because whenever I moved up to Boston, teaching at an international school, that was actually the teaching environment that I wanted when I thought that I wanted to pursue the JET program. And it's kind of unfortunate that I think I used up all like my teaching gusto in Japan, because like
Yeah.
those were like a bunch of kids who weren't that interested, but I did love it. And I poured in my heart and soul into that. And now like every year I kept getting like better and better students. Like that energy of me waned. Like that's one thing. Another thing tied back into that prefectural advising type stuff. To recap everything so far, like, is your current work situation that bad? Like the salary that you had in the States, could that not enable you to do what you wanted to or pursue the passions that you wanted? And then, are you looking at the JET program realistically? Like, again, not saying that it can't be, but if you really think about it, what exactly is it about teaching in Japan that you find so fulfilling that you couldn't find elsewhere? And then I'm going to transition that into like another point, because this is like the difference between you and me, I guess. Like, where we're both from Arkansas, you stayed there and you managed to find something, right? For
Hmm.
me, I made the decision. I'm like, man, like Arkansas has nothing for me. I got to go try something else. And maybe before going jumping ship back to Japan, did I really try to live in the US? Did I really try to live in America? Maybe I should try a bigger city. So we have no idea whether this person is rural, or maybe they already
Yeah.
are in a big city or what, but maybe a different location in the US, or maybe a place in like a different country, possibly.
So, going back to the sense of urgency, so I feel like her time frame, again, like you said, you don't want to be like that type of person who's just like, just suck it up. But then, like, that's just kind of like my type of personality. Not telling other people to suck it up, but like for me personally, I just like suck it up and deal with it.
Hmm.
Right. And so one of the things I'm also thinking about is like she's only been here for a year, or at least she's been at her job for a year. She could have looked for a job for a few months and then been with that job for years, so maybe like a year and a half or so. All right. And so the thing is, I remember after Korea, and I'm sure this may be the case for you too, the year or 2 years after being there, you start to miss it and you romanticize the place,
Hmm.
and then there's a part of you like, oh, I want to go back, because you're either struggling here or like once you leave the place you only remember the good things. And like you said, you don't know if she's given it enough time, tried like other cities. And so that's like, I feel like that's like another thing to consider. It's just like she may be at that point where she's still romanticizing Japan, because like for me, the first few months, I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm so happy to be back in America. But then, like, a year to 2 years, I start to romanticize the idea of going back. But then, like, now I'm at a point where, like, it's very balanced, where it's like, oh, I see the good and negative points. And so, like, I think she's still at a place where, you know, you, she might not be thinking on both sides clearly because I think she's still at that longing phase.
They talk about culture shock and reverse culture shock, and like
Oh,
you
that
nailed it
is
on the
so
head.
real.
The honeymoon phase, it's like not only can you get it when you go to the place, you can
Mhm.
definitely feel it when you come back home. Let's take a look at a couple of other comments from former Jets who replied to a post I made, and let's see if I, because I'm friends with all these people, I'm not too surprised by all their responses. They're all good points. They're going to kind of reinforce some of the things that we talked about. But the prompt I put out there was, former Jets, have you ever considered another run? Why or why not? And this first response from Amy was, no, because I'd like to have an actual career. And not to diminish the value of Jet, which is highly effective in grassroots cultural exchange. That's very PC of Amy. But ultimately, it's a dead end, temporary contract based gig from which there's little growth to be expected. That's a good point. Like personal growth, I think that was like the biggest thing for me when I was over there.
Mhm.
Professional growth. I mean, you do get the practice. It's basically public speaking practice every single day, and like you get to drill that in. And if that's important to you, I mean, that is something that's important to me. That can be awesome. But if you know like your long term career isn't related to education, or that if you're going to be in this like business role and like you need to get on these type of projects that are going to give you that business experience sooner, you're just kind of like delaying and shooting yourself in the foot, right?
Yeah, that's why I came back because it's just like, oh, I'm just delaying like me like working in media and like not getting experience.
This next
Yeah.
comment from Tiffany, my senpai, she said, I had the time of my life, but having been there 5 years, I got the experience I was looking for and gave back to the community program as much as I could. Going back on Jet wouldn't give me any additional life experience or career opportunities, even though Jet could benefit from my prior experience as ALT. Aside from that, I can contribute much more than I did in the first place. She's still all in basically, and that wasn't even something that I considered. What more do I even have to give? Like I
Mm.
guess my trajectory on everything's been so weird because when I left originally, I was like, I need to be doing something more. And then came back, hit reality, had struggles with the job market. And I was like, oh man, I was a fool to leave, like having that stable income and getting paid really well. And then thinking like, oh, maybe I would just go back. But I think eventually, yeah, I would hit that point where I talked with Chase about it before that in my third year, I had the best students in the entire 3 years. But even at that point, that wasn't enough to make me stick around. Going back just for the money, hey, everybody's got to carve their own pathway. And it's not like would completely disregard kids. Money is good, but that might not be enough either.
It also depends on the person.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something I didn't consider is like how much if like going back to teach English, like how much more does it give to your personal growth? And then that's a good point that's like, oh, like what people commented, like, oh, I couldn't, there was no growth. And when I was concerned going back to Korea, it was because I needed money,
Mm-hmm.
not because like I wanted like I guess like yeah, in hindsight it's just like, oh, I wasn't really gonna develop any more professionally. It's just like I just needed to pay my loans. And so I
Right.
wanted to go back. And since I was struggling in America, like I was romanticizing, oh, Korea was great. I had a job and I could pay for my loans. But yeah, that's a really good point. It's just like I guess that's something for her to consider as well. Like, is it going to be fulfilling for her career wise, like personally?
And again, it's something that's really tricky because this is something I've been working with some of my clients about. It's like when you are a smart individual and like you know how to use your logic, you can fall into that trap of bullshitting yourself. where like you can lay out all the reasons and they will sound good, but they still might not be the real thing. So going back to the original comment when they were like, something about teaching in Japan like really struck a chord with them. It could be it, but that could still maybe not be the real reason, you know? One more comment here. This is from Caitlin. She said that going in a jet without an exit plan is a problem lots of jets make. I definitely did. But going back won't help you find one if you never had one in the first place.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was a good hammer from Caitlin, right? I don't know if I have anything else to add to that one. So if we were gonna wind down, I think we had a pretty good talk over with it, and that's exactly what I wanted. Was there any other considerations you think, Minichelle?
No, I think we covered a lot of things.
Okay. So for any other former Jets, especially those if you did do a second run, let us know in the comments below how it turned out for you. Was it awesome? Was it exactly how you planned? Maybe it wasn't what you were intending, but things worked out for the best, or hopefully not. If you had a shit time, tell us about that too, because some of those shit stories, again, we don't want to pass on negativity, but we want to keep things realistic and not just put out the fluff just to have fluff.